Let's go ahead and get started, guys. So thanks for joining our session. So this is going to be an introduction to the current state of Birst and what things look like, and kind of give you an overview to some of the fundamental concepts. So we'll look at our agenda here real quick. So we're going to start out, we're going to break this presentation into 3 different sections. So we'll talk about some of the foundational concepts. What are analytics? What are some of the problems organizations face today? And how are they potentially being solved with that technology? Then we're going to talk, in particular, we're going to talk about Infor analytics. So both CSF and GHR, what are they? How do they work? How do you get them set up? And then we'll talk about, the last section will be putting it all together, where we'll talk about a strategy for success, as far as how do you take all the pieces? How do you take the tools and work with your organization, and what's the methodology to apply everything to deliver value to your organization? So a quick introduction. So my name is Aaron Epps. So I've been in the healthcare space for over 20 years. I continue to be based out of beautiful Rochester, Minnesota. I worked for Mayo Clinic for about 13 years. I've been consulting for the last 7. My background is in technology, and I have been focused primarily on reporting and analytics for a long time, and in particular in the Lawson space for about the last 8 years.
Hey everyone, my name is Bo Hunt. I'm a business intelligence architect with RPI. Been with RPI for about 4 years. Been in the kind of the ERP supply chain management space now for about 16 years, both on the provider side and the supplier side. And now my focus has been on reporting and analytics. So we're happy to bring you guys up to speed and help you feel a little bit more comfortable with that.
All right, great. So I'm going to go through here. Is everybody, I saw some comments. Is everybody able to hear me okay? Are we getting some feedback from the microphone, or does it sound good? Just let me know if we're having any audio issues here. So some things to think about before we get into the presentation. If you have questions about Infor's reporting strategy, products, technology, tools, architecture, anything like that, there's certainly been a lot of moving pieces over the last few years. Technology has changed, products have changed, and so there's been a lot of moving pieces. And so we certainly want to make sure that we answer those questions for you, and that our time is today together is well spent. Think about what you want to get out of this presentation. Of course, we have slides and we have a talk track that we're prepared to go through, but we really enjoy engaging with you and answering the questions that you have. So feel free to chime in and send a message in chat as we go through these areas, and we want to make sure that you get out of this presentation what you came to it for. So think about some of the problems that you're facing today, both as HR, supply chain, and finance professional in your organization. And also, what's it like to access your information out of your ERP today? Is it, do you have that man in the middle approach where you have to go to somebody else to get the data and then they give it back to you? So we'll touch a bit on that model and how things change through self-service. And then also, again, think about the amount of time that it takes to prepare some of the content. So we know from working with customers, there's often a significant amount of time and effort that's put in to produce kind of these point-in-time snapshots of information on maybe a weekly or monthly or a quarterly basis. So think about that effort, and that's certainly one area we want to talk about, is potentially automating that type of work. Okay, so I'm going to start out and talk about some of the common challenges that we see with organizations that I've worked with. So the biggest problem, there's all kinds of different ways to slice and dice it, but really the 2 main problems that we hear is that as a business user, you can't get at your data. And there's 2 primary reasons for that current state for many customers. First one is that you've got kind of this man in the middle model, which is common for many of the organizations that we work with. There's a number of barriers between you and your information, right? They could be technical, they could be security, right? You just don't have access to go in and do the things you need to do. And it can also be related to understanding those data sets and how to put everything together. So if you've ever had the pleasure of exploring a large relational database system, you often have to go in and you have to figure out what table my data is in, but not all of it's there. So I have to join it with this other table. And the names, the columns, they're not exactly user-friendly, right? So you often have to look up and reference that information. then once you figure out where everything is, right, you have to write SQL to go and get it. So there's lots of barriers, right, in the way. And so what happens in most organizations is that users have to submit that request to somebody else, right? So you have a need, you have a business question that's come up that you don't have a report readily available to answer. So you get in line, right? And you submit that request to IT, and then you have to wait for that to be processed, communicate your requirements and get that back. And that often can take a significant amount of time. So there's certainly frustration in being able to access and find your information that is in your ERP. Many users today are spending a lot of time on manual reporting and data manipulation. So running, some of the classic Lawson jobs, RW100 reports for finance, PO135 for those in supply chain, PA100 for HR professionals, getting that output, in some case printing that output, right, and comparing data sets side by side, right? So there's a lot of manual generation and processing of data that takes place. So as a result of these issues, many decisions that are made by instinct, right? They're not data driven because you just can't get the data in the time frame that you have, right? You may have somebody needs an answer by tomorrow or in a couple of days, and with how difficult it is to access that information and get something that you trust and can make a business decision on, people often have to go with their gut, right? And say, well, this is what we did last time when this situation arose. This is what I feel the right thing is to do based on my experience. Which can be challenging because, if there's ever any question about why you made that decision or what were the things that drove that decision, you don't have anything objective, right, to back up that decision with. It's all subjective in your decision-making process. So the other risk as well, too, is we see, of course, is inconsistent decentralized information, right? So you have people using a variety of different tools and getting that data in a variety of different ways and putting it together. And everybody obviously is doing what they think the right thing is, but it could be the data that they extracted was from a different point in time when somebody else did it, right? So the numbers are different, or their calculation might be slightly off, or they might have something not done correctly in Excel. So the risk is you have lots of people producing information that people are basing business decisions on, and it may or may not be consistent across organizations. So you might have people making decisions off of data that could potentially be inaccurate or out of date. So, when we work with many customers, we talk about, how they kind of got to that state where people have a lot of different tools. And so I like to kind of go through this illustration. I think it really lays out what the plan was and kind of where things started to go awry with some of the legacy BI technologies that were great for data governance, right? You had control of that data and how it was calculated, but they weren't agile, right? It wasn't responsive. And so that caused a number of problems. So many organizations started out, they had this dream, right? We're going to have a big enterprise data warehouse or data lake or however you refer to it, right? Where we're a big repository of information where we're going to put everything. We're going to pull it together and it'll be accurate and it'll be governed and everybody will just report off of that and everything will go well, right? So they went and they developed that. And then, of course, exactly one day after that system went live, right, somebody had an urgent need for something that wasn't met by that rigid schema, right? And the processes, the governance that were in place took too long, right? So somebody got an export from that. So you have your first silo of information being extracted from that centralized data warehouse. And then that extraction became, critical to the business. And so they then took that information, they shared it with the colleague. The departments went and said, well, if we just had our own system, we can synchronize that with the centralized system and we'll just report off of that and so on and so forth, right? And so you end up with a variety of tools accessing data in a variety of different ways and all these different snapshots of information. So again, when you're looking at how are we performing financially as an organization or what does our supply chain look like, you really don't have that visibility because you have so many different things you have to go into and so many different ways in which that information is being presented. So some of the benefits that people commonly see by adapting a good analytics and reporting strategy, of course, is increases in operational efficiency. We want to work with you to identify those time-intensive manual processes and eliminate those. When I work with customers, I tell them this is going to be the last time you're going to write this report, right? We're going to do it once. It's going to always be pulling from a centralized source that's governed and trusted. You never have to develop that weekly, that monthly, that quarterly report that takes, a significant portion of time. It enables you as an organization to make better business decisions. It's all about easy access to trusted data, right? How do you get into it? And we'll talk a bit about that, what we mean by that when we talk about the Infor analytics products and how they work. One of the other points I'd like to bring out as well too is, while it's great to have easy access to information and even have the reports and dashboards that you need, what's even better is to take those analytics and embed them directly within the workflow. And so this is something unique to Lawson and their Birst product. So for example, let's say you have a complex business process that your users go through within the ERP. Let's say it's 17 steps, right, that they go through. And you know on step 12, there's a decision point, right? And they need all this different data, not a report, not something that's static, but they need a dynamic tool, right? So they can pivot and look at the information in different ways and make a decision based off of that data. You can develop kind of that self-service ad hoc analysis tool and embed it directly within the ERP. So they never even have to leave the Infor Lawson system as they're working through that business process. When they reach a point where they need data or to do some ad hoc analysis, it's right there. They do the analysis, make a decision, and continue on through the process without ever having to leave. Of course, looking to standardize and consolidate all the different tools and eliminate the silos of information. If you implement a platform that is both governed and agile, it allows you to have data that's trusted, but to give people the agility to get at that information easily. And that addresses the issue or the root cause of why those silos and those different tools appeared over time. And of course, you want to modernize your capabilities, right? Everybody comes into the workplace with expectations that are set from outside the workplace as a consumer, right? So when we talked about that man in the middle model, right, where you have to go and request information from somebody else, they go get it, and then they bring it back to you. As consumers, that very rarely happens anymore, right? Everything is at our fingertips, right? We have all of these self-service tools, whether it's your financial information, whether it's doing a degree online, everything is at your fingertips, and you can get it without having to go and have kind of this intermediary in between you and what you're trying to do. So an example I like to give, when we talk about this ad hoc analysis and dynamic tools and what they look like, as opposed to reports, is, I like to give the example of booking an airline ticket. So the man in the middle analogy that I used earlier is similar to how we used to book airfare, right? So you had a travel agent, you gave him a call, right? Because you didn't have access to the data that he had access to. And you said, hey, I want to go from Minneapolis to New York. I prefer American. I'd really like it to be nonstop as long as it's not over $500, right? And so they would go, he said, great, let me take a look at it. Let me run the numbers. I'll get back to you with some quotes, right? That's that man in the middle approach. And that's how we do, in many organizations, that's how you do financial analysis or supply chain analysis, right? Is by having somebody go and get that data and then bring it back to you so you can make a decision. When we talk about dynamic ad hoc analysis, it's how we all interact and do that same activity today, right? And I like to use this because it's an example that we can all relate to. So when you land on these sites, right, whatever your favorite booking site is, you land on top of a huge governed data set, right? They have all flights, all destinations, all airlines around the world. And what they do is they put in little knobs and levers in the UI, right, that allow you to pivot around the data, right? Put in those preferences, like I talked about, where do you want to leave from, where are you going to, how many stops, etc. And so you can go and you can whittle that huge data set down to something very specific. And within a matter of minutes, right, you can make a data-driven decision and say, this is the best flight for me, right? So that's what I mean when I'm talking about ad hoc analysis tools, is developing that type of capability for finance, for supply chain, and for HR professionals in your organization based off of that governed data from your ERP and potentially from other third-party systems as well. All right, so now we're going to transition and we kind of covered some of the fundamentals. Again, if you have any questions, please put them in chat. We'll monitor that and answer those as quickly as we can. And now we're going to pivot and we're going to talk about specifically what are Infor analytics, both for CSF and for HCM. How do they work with Birst? What does that look like? What are the advantages? So I'm going to hand it off to Bo, and we're going to talk about some of the details of this technology. And again, please, if you have questions, bring it up as we're going through this content.
Cool, thanks, Aaron. So yeah, one of the things that I kind of like to lay out for people right at the forefront is, there's a difference between the tool or the platform that something's delivered in, and then the actual, the analytics solution. So Birst, when we're talking about Infor CSF analytics, we are talking about content that's delivered via Birst. But unlike some of the past tools that have been out there, like LBI and Infor BI, where really what you're getting is you're getting that platform. It's a blank sandbox, and now you can start building content out. With CFS Analytics, you actually get a lot more of that out of the box. So in addition to just having the Birst platform, which is been used widely by many customers across industries, not just within your ERPs, what we're also getting is Infor is releasing a data model and sample content for you to get started, pick up, and start getting your report modeling out for Cloud Suite Financials and for version 10. So when we look at what's there, again, it's the data model. So we're taking the data out of those relational data tables that are in Lawson. That maybe right now we do need that man in the middle approach, because we need someone that can kind of translate that into a usable report for your business users. With this pre-built content, it's designed in a way so that your business users can build their reports without needing to go to IT every time to get their data normalized and all that.
Right, and that's one of the things I want to touch on too there, Bo, is with that data model. So I think arguably the most valuable piece of the pre-built content is the data model, right, that you get from Infor, because that's something that they've developed, and it addresses that need. It addresses the complexity of accessing your information. And if you want to see what that looks like, we're going to be doing show and tell sessions all afternoon, where we're actually going to go in and we're going to build content in real time, right? So we're going to go in, we're going to access data from HCM, from finance and supply chain, no SQL, no scripting, no joins, right? The data model manages all that complexity. As a business user, you just go in and you say, okay, these are the attributes or the pieces of information that I want for my report, and the model manages that. Makes it easy for you to go in, find what you're looking for, and get that data out without any of that, having to know any of the technical tools or data relationships.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks, Aaron. And one thing that's important to note is, the pre-built analytics that are out there. It was developed, first for Cloud Suite Financials, but there is a version for V10 Analytics today as well. So if you're on Lawson, maybe your Cloud Suite implementation is a few years down the road, but you want to dip your toes in, you can get access to that pre-built content modeled from your version 10 Lawson. And we'll talk about kind of what that looks like architecturally here in a little bit. But that is something that's available, and not all customers are aware of that. The other thing that's nice, so when we get into access within Birst, security is built in out of the box. So it's based on roles as well as your user context. So when you get into some of the financial reports, you can actually have one dashboard for all users, and it can contextually change based on how their security is set up within Cloud Suite. So one of the things, especially around financial reporting, that's changed recently, I think it was about 3 months ago, 11.07.8 came out, or I'm sorry, 11.07.9. When 11.708 came out, financial reporting really was able to be done using the GL structures. So previous to that update, we did have supply chain reporting. We had some high-level finance reports, but we didn't have access to the GL structures that you have in Cloud Suite. And one of the nice things about Cloud Suite is obviously how customizable that GL is. So there was a lot of infrastructure that needed to go in, and now we do have those structures in. We have all the hierarchies, so we can do custom reporting. Like Aaron mentioned, we're going to actually do a little bit of reporting in the sessions later on today, both in finance and in HCM. So if you guys want to take a look at what that looks like, we'll be showing that. And then in 11.07.8, we also, or Infor also added some additional templates for financial reporting. So there's a delivered balance sheet, income statement, as well as some other analysis reports that you can take and use as starting points.
And Bo, that's one of the points I want to mention too when we talk about financial reporting. So I think Infor's approach has really been with CSF analytics, and even for HCM analytics to a certain extent, is that they don't necessarily want to provide you with something that's super tailored, right, for financial reporting, because the thought is that everybody's organizational financial reporting is so unique, it would be really hard to hit the nail on the head, right? To deliver, a totally complete balance sheet or income statement. So what they've done is they've built these templates, right? So you're certainly not starting from scratch, but they've built out maybe 80% or 90% of what an income statement or balance sheet would look like. And then the thought is then you take that as your starting template and then just finish it off, the last 10%, with those unique rules that you have for your organization, right? How things are calculated, different business logic or business rules, tailor it, make it your own, and then it's complete, right? So I like to set that expectation when it comes to the pre-built content, is that it's something that's probably 90% of the way there, and you just need to tailor it and make it your own to make it complete.
Absolutely. All right. So similarly, over on the HCM side, if we go to the next slide, we've got we've got good reporting, and we'll have a layout here in a little bit of what reports and dashboards are available both on the FSM and the GHR side. But they've done a nice job of creating some of that critical reporting around turnover analysis, headcount analysis, and that sort of thing is pre-delivered right out of the box with some of the delivered dashboards. What we're looking at now is the visualizer tool, and again in the sessions we have a little bit later, we'll be hands-on with this. But this is really what your users use to develop reports, dashboards, charts, that sort of thing. What you see over on the left-hand side of the pane there really is the data model. It's what's called the subject areas, and these are all of the different fields, the measures, the KPIs that are built out within that pre-delivered data model, that you can go through and select the reports to drag and drop them into your reports. If you notice on the right-hand section, we're kind of zoomed in on that subject area on the search bar. And what we did was we started putting in GLT functional amount. We can see all those fields that are already pre-calculated for us. And again, just double-clicking them or dragging them over into the various report categories over here will bring them onto our report canvas. Makes it for a real easy to use interface for your business users.
Right. Yeah, and that's one of the things I'd like to point out too is with this data model, you've probably heard people during presentations talk about the semantic layer, right? Which is basically just a fancy way of saying they present data to you in terminology that makes sense to a business user, right? You know what things are called in general ledger. You know how to find them. So you can either go through on the left-hand side and you can just go through that hierarchy and click down to find the areas that you need. And again, just drag and drop them to start creating that report, or you can type it in and search, right? So it makes it very easy to find in business terminology, right? It's not, like it used to be in V10 and prior systems where you had to know what 8-character abbreviated column name meant, right? It's actually presented to you as GLT functional amount, right? The business terminology that makes sense to you as a business end user, so you can easily find that information without having to consult a relational data dictionary.
And one thing, a lot of times you get into organizations and you have terminology that's used within a specific department. It's very easy to customize this, rename some of these fields so that they do make sense to your business users. So a lot of customization that's available for you. Yep,
absolutely.
All right, so then the next couple slides, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on, but this gives you I'm not going to read through these, but it gives you an overview of the pre-built content that's delivered. So by subject area, kind of the dashboards that are available, reports, the KPIs, filters. If you wanted more information on some of this content, one thing that we can do is we do custom demos for customers to take them through what that looks like. And we can also provide you with more information on what KPIs are calculated by subject area. And this gives you a nice overview of what's available on the supply management and financial side. And then we have a similar slide for the HCM content here, which shows the breakdown of all the different data points that are within the pre-delivered HCM.
And one of the things I like to mention too is when you're looking at this, while you look at the amount of content, the different subject areas that are there, it's certainly not static, right? It's evolving on a regular basis. So Infor is moving towards roughly a quarterly release basis where they continue to build this content out, right? They're adding different subject areas. So for example, they're adding, benefits into HCM and some of those different areas. So it's continually evolving. So it's not something that once it's implemented, it's static and you're only going to have access to that information. Infor will continue to evolve both the model and the pre-built content. And if you need to, we can also extend that model as well. So it's a really significant head start on being able to access your information. We know from having worked with Infor development that to build out this data model, right, for an ERP, which is complex, intricate work, we know they've put in about 15,000 man hours, right, to get you to this point. And that's one of the things I really like to drive home when we're talking with customers about their strategy is that, if you choose not to leverage that pre-built data model or a different tool, your first step is to build out that data model yourself, right? You have to start, that's the hill you have to climb to get to where Infor is today. And of course, they're going to continue to build on that, right? So you're always going to be playing catch up. So it certainly makes sense strategically to leverage all of that effort that's been put in and will continue to be put in as these products mature and evolve over time.
All right, so how does all of this come together? We talked about a lot of things. We've talked about, we've got customers out there that maybe they've been running with their own data warehouse and they've invested a lot of time into that. Does going over to CSF Analytics mean that they have to kind of put that behind them? And the answer is no. So we do have the pre-delivered data that's coming in from Cloud Suite or from version 10 Lawson. But we can also incorporate data from your existing data models. And maybe that has Lawson data in it. Maybe you're blending in data from third-party systems, performance management systems, whatever the case may be. Birst has the capability of pulling that all together through the ETL processes. We can also do live callbacks to data from third-party systems, pull it in and create those dashboards and visualizations overarching just your Lawson system. So one of the important things to remember with Birst is, before it was acquired by Infor, it really was an open-ended solution. It was designed to get data from any available data point. So that functionality hasn't gone away with Infor. That's still open-ended architecture, and we can bring that data in. One of the other nice things, once we have our visualizations, we have everything that we've expanded on. Some users, they still want to be able to do analysis within Excel. So with the open client interface, they're able to pull that data out and they're able to do analysis in there. But the nice thing is they're always pulling from that single source of truth that you've defined in your for your ERP reporting solution.
Yeah, and a couple other points I just want to touch on quick with this. One of the common questions we get, of course, is how does this work with my existing data warehouse, right? We already have an EDW. Our company's put 10 years of effort into building this thing out. Is it complementary to that? And it certainly is, right? It'll integrate with this technology stack and allow you to access that information as is. So certainly don't think of this as something that's rip and replace or that would compete with all of the data that you've built, but it does provide a good tool set or a true platform to tap in and access that information and to be able to blend it with data from your ERP. So one other point is up on the top, if you look at the semantic layer, you see you kind of have those orange circles of information. So there's a really great feature I like to talk about called Network BI. And so what that does is, with many reporting tools, if you've been involved in creating or consuming reports, that you create something and it can be difficult to share, right? That content with somebody else or to access the data model that somebody else created. So with Network BI, what it does is it allows you to create these logical sets of information and then easily share that with each other. So finance can access supply chain's data, supply chain can access HR data if they need to, all within that same interface without any complexity. So when you do that through the platform and Visualizer, you may be accessing data from multiple systems, but to the end user, it's seamless. Again, you don't care about where it's coming from. You just know you need A, B, and C bits of information and you want to pull it together to do that. The other thing is you can also manage governance with that. So we talked earlier about having a bunch of different tools and people getting downloads and doing VLOOKUPs and running macros to come to a number, right? Whatever that number is. there's no governance around that, right? Because everybody's got their own solution. With the network BI, what you can do, for example, is if you have well-defined financial performance KPIs for your organization, right? You can define those in one place and then make those easily accessible to anybody that needs to include that, whether it's a calculation that they're doing, a simple report, ad hoc analysis. They can easily access that information and create the content or the tools that they need. Down the road, if those calculations ever change, like let's say your definition of turnover changes, right? You can go and you can make that change in one place, and then everything that uses that calculation will automatically be updated. So you can imagine over the years, right, you get hundreds or thousands of reports that people build out. If you have that governed model in place, where, for example, where people can easily access your organizational definition of turnover, today, what often happens is if that changes, everybody has to go and update it in different ways and different tools, and you really don't know if you're all looking at the same number. But with this model in place, you can change it in one place, and then that's going to automatically propagate so that, again, everything is updated and trusted. So it's about that easy access to accurate data. So you're not arguing, when you go into a meeting or you're working on a business problem, you don't have to spend the time figuring out where did this data come from, how old is it? How did you do these calculations? If it's coming from that governed model, you can trust that information, and it's good to base business decisions off of.
All right, so we'll talk a little bit about kind of how data flows. So what we're looking at here is the infrastructure within a multi-tenant Cloud Suite environment. So we have our Cloud Suite data over here on the left-hand side in that gray box. And really that's going to be all of our data that lives in the business classes within Cloud Suite. We use replication sets to get data out of the Cloud Suite system over into Ion. We're doing that through an IMS connector. So those replication sets are typically scheduled. They're going to push data out into, through IMS over into Ion. And Ion, the data lake, is basically a S3 database that is accessible by third-party systems. So from there, we have jobs that within Birst that will pick those up. They're picking data up out of there. They're doing extract and transform and pulling it into that data model. Again, that's denormalized. It's made in a way that makes sense to your business users. We have jobs that run within Birst. They're called orchestration routines. And there's basically a set of scripted routines that will pick that up, transform that, get it into the data model on a timely and scheduled basis so that your UI layer can then report with the dashboards, visualizations, those all report on that data layer. One thing I do want to point out, if we go back to the left-hand side where we talk about the OLAP cubes, there is some confusion with Cloud Suite customers. This reporting has kind of changed face since Cloud Suite Financials first came out. So those OLAP cubes, those are powering the legacy Application Studio or Infor BI reports. So those cubes are not used for any of the Birst reporting that you'll see in here. All of that goes through this replication process and then into the Birst data model. Similarly, if we look at the next slide, this kind of breaks down a similar process for your V10 customers. So what they're doing, one of the critical components of that is you do need to have the data replication service with Infor. And then from there, Birst uses a little bit different process, but through Birst Connect, it will pull data from that data replication server, go through those same orchestration scripts that I just talked about to get data into that V10 analytics model. And the reporting, while it's slightly different, obviously, because with V10, we have different data structures, specifically mostly around GL. The content that you see in there is pretty similar to the V11 analytics.
This is one too. I'll talk about this at the end, but I'm going to go back to the previous slide. If you are a multi-tenant customer and you have Birst regardless of version, and if you've had any issues getting this replication set up from CSF to Birst or from GHR to Birst, please let us know. We have an open offer. We're willing to show you how to do that, to configure that replication of data all the way from those source systems through to the Birst, so you can get that set up and replicated on a consistent basis. And we're willing to do that for free as an investment in new relationships. So if you're struggling, you're not able to get data in Birst, or you're not able to get it to replicate consistently, please reach out to us. Send an email to questions@rpic.com, and we'll be happy to connect with you and help you get that set up. Okay, so that's our technical portion. Before I get into this last part, so I see there have been some questions going in chat, which is great. So I answered as many of those as I could. So Bo will be monitoring that while I'm going to go through this. So I want to spend a little bit of time. We've talked about conceptually what are the problems that people are facing today. How are they potentially solved with these different tools and technologies? How does the Infor stuff work specifically? So now we want to talk about, how do you put it all together, right? How do you marry tools and processes and organization together to deliver something of value? And so I want to kind of talk through our general approach when we work with customers on the implementation. So there's really two phases or two milestones that you have to get through. So the first one is you have a boatload of reports that your organization uses today, right? And they're probably done in a variety of different tools. You may have LBI, Crystal Reports, Excel, MS add-ins, right? There's all kinds of different ways of how people are accessing information. So the first step in the process is to really assess and inventory current state, like what's out there, what's being used, who's it being used by, what's the need, right? So going in and building out that inventory. And then as we build out that inventory, we work with you to kind of to make it lean, right? To get rid of things that maybe are redundant, things that aren't needed anymore, things that could be consolidated. The example I like to give of consolidation is employee lists, right? Most organizations have like 37 to 142 employee lists, right? And they're all slightly different versions of themselves, right? One had a different column added, one is grouped differently, one is sorted differently. With the technology that's available to you in CSF and GHR, and even for V10, you can actually go and make those things dynamic, right? So you can create one list and allow your end users to go in, and they can add and remove columns, they can change the grouping, the sorting, etc., and then they can bookmark it and kind of personalize that list, right? So at the end of the day, you really only have one employee list that you have to take care of, but everybody can then take it and dynamically personalize it. So that's an example of consolidation of those. So you can get rid of those and allow people to do that on their own via self-service. So once that list has been trimmed down, then we work with you to prioritize the list, right? What's needed for go live, because the goal of this milestone is really, you want to make sure from day one, when that new system goes live, you want to make sure you're delivering reporting that's at least as good as, hopefully better than what people have today, right? So we want to make sure that you can say that with confidence, that you inventoried and prioritized everything. And then we help you do the solution mapping, right? So you have different types of things that need to be built out. Some of them are going to change, right? Some of them are going to stay the same. It just depends. And you have a number of tools at your disposal to figure out what's the best way. And so from that, then we kind of get a punch list of reports that have to be delivered for current state. And then that's what we use to base our estimate off of to get that up and ready for go live. Normally, once that's done, or sometimes in parallel to that work, we go through design. And design is really meant to be for somebody that wants to re-engineer how their organization is consuming information. Like take turnover is a good example. Many customers we've worked with have said, we're providing turnover reporting today. It's maybe not as useful as it could be. We'd really like to optimize this. And we'd like to leverage what Infor has delivered out of the box, right? Because they do give you some good ideas about how to present that information differently and more visually to people. So we then go through an iterative design process with you, which I'll talk about in a few slides in detail, to help you figure out, how we're going to take advantage of what's provided to you out of the box to really change that experience and allow people easy access to the information that they're looking for. So again, you've got a number of tools available to you. You have work lists, right, that you can build out, which are things that are going to be real time, right? Maybe it's something within the ERP. It's a list that you act upon, right? You go through that list and you update things or information as you go through that list. You have traditional reports, right? Some financial reports are just going to stay the way they've always been because maybe there's requirements that specify a certain format. And then you've got dashboards, right? And so that's something where you visually want to present important information, at a high level, how is our organization performing financially, and allow people then to drill into detail as needed. So when we do that design, there's really 3 steps that we go through. So we subscribe to the value-based design methodology, and no matter what you're doing or what data you're looking at, there's really 3 key steps that you go through. The first one is you're going to display the information, right? You're going to look for things. Is everything okay? Is the house on fire? Does anything require my attention? You're looking for anomalies or outliers, and that's much easier to do visually than it is by looking at rows and rows of data, right? We have to go through 127 pages of a crystal report, right? So we want to make it easy to identify the current state of things, right? Once you find those anomalies, then you're going to go to another level where you're going to diagnose the problem and figure out what's going on. And then the last step is, okay, now that you understand what's going on, you need to decide what it is that you're going to do about it. So we really focus on those 3 steps, and we build the pyramid from the top down. So starting with KPIs. KPIs are the same thing as KPIs. They're just the most important KPIs. So take, for example, finance, right? In an organization, you probably have tens or hundreds of KPIs that you monitor for financial performance and different metrics. But of those KPIs that are there are probably 5 that are really, really important, right? So those are KPIs. So we build those at the top and then figure out what are the things that drive those KPIs, what are the actions you can take, who are the users that can do something about it. Again, because you want this information to be actionable, right? When you identify an issue that's going on in your organization, you want to get down to the root cause and figure out who can do something about this and who do I need to contact or what needs to change to improve that KPI. Of course, we leverage templates and best practices, right? So we go through the value-based design methodology, we document all of those KPIs, kind of build out that pyramid, and then we use that to build these types of dashboards. So here's an example of a display dashboard, right? Again, am I okay? And then the diagnose, right? Getting down to the details of what's going on. And then the last step, getting down to the detail of deciding what to do. So we really advocate, again, you can always get down to the rows and columns of data that you're maybe used to, but it makes it easier to analyze large data sets when you do it visually to find those anomalies and then drill down to that detail. So when we go through the design, it's a little bit different than most approaches because what we do is it's not a technical exercise, right? We don't just show up and say, okay, we know all these tools, now what do you want to do for reporting? We pair our technical team with a functional expert. So this is going to be someone that has probably 10, 15, 20 years of loss and experience in whatever the relevant area is, HR, finance, supply chain. And they're going to come in and they're going to help facilitate that process because you certainly want to challenge the status quo. There's little or no value in taking everything the way you do it today and just re-implement it in a new tool on a new platform. You certainly want to look for opportunities to improve and to deliver value to your organization, provide those role-based dashboards and visualizations that everybody's looking for based on their role. When it comes to enablement, we have a three-step process that we go through. So the first step is, when we have that work list and it's prioritized high, medium, and low, we lead the development with you kind of looking over the shoulder to get the high stuff done, so we make sure that that's all finished and ready for go live. And then we step into a collaborative phase when we tackle the medium priority items. And that's where we're really working side by side. So we're teaching you the technology, the tooling, the best practices for building out some of that content. And again, if you're interested in seeing the tools and how they work, I definitely recommend that you come to our show and tell sessions. We have 4 of them this afternoon, so they're every hour on the hour. If you can make one of those, we're going to show you what that experience looks like. And I think it's really powerful to see everything in action. And then the last step is then as a customer, you're fully enabled. You understand the tooling, you understand how to conduct design sessions, gather requirements, break the work into sprints, and then iterate and deliver value on an ongoing basis. So the design sessions are not a technical exercise. It's really, I really refer to them as whiteboarding sessions, right? We want to get up and really just draw what are the things that you want and mock out those wireframes. We're not going to get into detail on the technologies or the specifics. It's as a financial analysis, what's the information you need, right, to do these particular jobs in your organization, right? So we go through that role-based design. Okay, so we're just going to kind of recap here. So we talked about the foundational concepts, right? Gave you kind of a good base understanding of problems and the tools available to solve them. We talked about Infor analytics for both CSF and GHR, how they work and how you might apply them. And then we talked about RPI's strategy of how we put it all together to make sure that your implementation goes smoothly and you have a prescriptive plan that you can leverage as part of your implementation. Again, if you're struggling, please let us know. We are experts. We are happy to help you get things set up. If you're looking to get replication set up between CSF and Birst or GHR and Birst, let us know. We'll do that for free as an investment in a new relationship. And of course, we can then provide you with continued advisory and development support as needed. So if you are in that state, reach out. It's quick. We can get you set up very promptly and have that issue resolved for you. So email us at questions@rpic.com